My name is Jim Hackett, and I'm Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Anadarko Petroleum. It's an exploration and production company, and it's called an independent exploration production company, unlike a Shell or an ExxonMobil that would have refineries and petrochemical facilities for making plastics and carpeting and shoes for basketball. This is purely a company that goes and tries to find new resources and develop those resources. So we'll hire people to go drill our wells. We'll hire people to actually provide the fluids for that. We're basically more of a field operation for our production and an office operation for our different forms of what we call intellectual capital, which would be our geoscientists, our engineers, our treasury folks, our marketing folks. In terms of who we sell to, it's really a wholesale commodity, and we will sell to a number of the majors who have refinery operations, because all of our crude oil has to be, if you will, transformed into a more useful product like gasoline or jet fuel. And we will sell natural gas to a utility, for example, or a major customer, an industrial customer. And so we don't actually use any of the products that we actually produce except where we use it for energy consumption on the facilities in which we produce it from. So for cooking or for, again, making plastics, we'll sell natural gas for heat for homes in the winter. Well, for one, is I'm not a good example of anybody looking out for you but God, because the way I got in the oil and gas business was actually when I was getting out of college. I had remembered a conversation I had back in 8th grade with a girlfriend's father, actually in the Chicago area, where we were talking about what I was going to study in high school, and I was going to study Russian. And he said, well, if you ever want to use your Russian, come to work at Amoco. And I never forgot it. And so when I went to try to get a job after college, I went to interview with Amoco. And through the interview process, I was lucky enough to secure a job. And then I asked, of course, the day after I arrived, I asked, well, can I go to Russia? My first trip was actually to Egypt. I was going on an audit there. And they said, well, you can't go. And I said, why not? And they said, well, we can't get you out. And I said, really? And I said, why? And they said, well, because we don't have any operations there, and we're in a Cold War. And I went, oh my God. And that's how I got in the oil and gas business. So you do have to get lucky occasionally. It turned out I absolutely loved the energy field, and ultimately knew I had to go back and get an MBA, which I did, and then I went back into engineering. But as you progress through different sets of your life, I think, in a career, you oftentimes have a goal for a set period of time. I went to the Air Force Academy because all I ever wanted to do was fly. My dad was an Army Air Corps pilot. My eyes went bad, and the war ended in Vietnam. So then I had to change what my goals were. Then they became to do something with my Russian. Turns out the Russian wasn't the key. It turned out that being in the oil and gas business and using finance and engineering skills were the key that really gave me passion. And as you went along, you of course met these wonderful people who would help you along, as long as I think you're a good person and you try hard and you actually care about competence and meritocracy. And so you eventually, I think, for all of us, if those basic ingredients are there, you tend to be a bit more successful than you ever dreamed you would be. Now, I think the definition of success is at the heart of actually answering that question about leadership, because there's a great quote that I think Martin Luther King had about, it doesn't take any kind of pedigree to be a leader, because anybody who serves others can be in a leadership position. You don't have to have a doctorate, you don't have to have a medical degree, and certainly you don't have to have a college degree. You don't certainly have to have an MBA. But we all do these sorts of things. The thing you've got to keep in mind is if you really want to be successful, is you have to figure out you have to do something bigger than yourself, something that's not focused on your own self-interest. If you chase money, you'll be miserable. You will end up making more than you ever dreamed of if you do things right. But the key is never to chase that dream of money. And the key is to chase a dream that is actually about something other than yourself. And I think you'll end up having a great experience both in terms of your career, as well as I think you will become a leader if you adopt that mentality. The key is for us is to make sure that you're always thinking about, is the strategy the right strategy for the enterprise to adapt to the environment in which you're in. And when you are responsible for over 4,500 people's lives, that's something that really, really bothers you. It should if you're a good leader, I think. And it certainly bothers me is, are we pursuing the right path? And is the management team that is surrounding each other, in the case of a number of us who are in the management team, are we doing the right things to challenge our own thinking? And hopefully all of us are different than each other, because if we're the same, we probably don't need each other. And in that process of being different from each other, do we share at least the same values about how to do business? Do you do it right? Yes, you do. And it's about making very hard decisions about people's lives and about what the direction of the business ought to be. And so from my standpoint, the first thing is making sure you're pursuing the right business model. That's the best protection for the people's livelihoods that you're responsible directly for. That's also the best protection for your shareholders' investment in you. And we have a philosophy at our company where our first objective is to maintain wealth. Our second objective is to grow wealth. So we should never do anything that puts the business at risk or the concept of maintaining wealth in order to grow wealth. And while your shareholders may not be always happy that you're growing quickly enough, at least you won't stand that horrible judgment day of actually destroying wealth someday. And so from our perspective, if you have the right philosophy about doing the right things the right way, you surround yourself with good people, all the things that everybody reads about in books, and you end up struggling through this very difficult issue of how do you project the future environment in a business that is unlike a lot of other businesses where our investments are 20 to 30 years forward in terms of what we decide to go and do. If you do that right, you'll end up being successful and retaining the maximum amount of jobs you can and growing the maximum amount of jobs that you possibly can as well.